Support for Carolina Business Review provided by Grant Thornton. Operating in more than 100 countries, our tax, audit, and advisory professionals specialize in helping companies unlock their growth potential. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of South Carolina, where healthcare is changing for the better. Find out how at ahealthysc.tv. And by Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services, with more than 300 operations in 35 countries.
Well, for years, in fact, for decades in the South, roads have meant more than just scenic highways and byways. The most obvious manifestation of this extensive blacktop network we have is connecting rural to urban and mountains to beaches, and of course, everything in between. Even a single spindly transportation filament has enabled places like the Outer Banks to be accessible and competitive. Welcome back to the most widely watched source for Carolina business and public policy. I'm Chris William, and this week, roads and transportation policy. It is so much more than repairing bridges and roads or widening highways, but the way we think and plan this, our most basic societal connector, has very broad implications on our growth and development and competitiveness globally. In a moment, our expert panel, including Myrtle Beach Chamber Chief Brad Dean and Winston-Salem Mayor Alan Joines, come back. And later on, North Carolina Transportation Secretary Tony Tata.
Major funding also by Novant Health, bringing you world-class technology, clinicians, and care when and where you need it. The Duke Endowment, a private foundation enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. And by Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina. Who's responsible for rising healthcare costs? Join us and many others in a candid discussion at letstalkcost.com. This edition of Carolina Business Review was recorded June 4th, 2013. On this week's program, Brad Dean of the Myrtle Beach Area Chamber of Commerce, Mayor Alan Joines of the City of Winston-Salem, and special guest Secretary Anthony J. Tata of the North Carolina Department of Transportation. Now, Chris William.
Hello, welcome to our program. Mayor, welcome back.
Good to be back.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Brad, welcome. Good to have you here as well. You know, it reflected a little bit on our dialogue today around transportation policy. And, you know, it seems that the Carolinas, and specifically South Carolina, have really have staked their claim on the business of transportation. Boeing, certainly, BMW, all the ancillary businesses around that. You could say the same thing about North Carolina, Honda Jet up in the Triad.
Right.
Freightliner in the Western Piedmont area, and the list goes on. Mayor, you know, when you look at transportation policy, and specific to Winston-Salem and the Triad, do you feel like you're getting some traction around this, or have we fallen back again because of what's happened in the economy the past? How are you feeling about it?
I think I feel pretty good. We're moving in the right direction. I think I mentioned to you earlier that we've had a couple of our large projects get behind because of some lawsuits that challenging some environmental issues. And by the time we worked through those, the dollars had been weren't there to redo them. So we had to catch up. But we finally got, particularly our urban loop is back on track now, starting to do that. We've got a couple of other large connector projects coming online. So we're seeing some good traction moving ahead.
Yeah, Brad, same thing. And let me just say this about, you know, the Grand Strand is saying you've needed a major interstate connection besides just kind of a drive-by on 95 for a long time, but yet you've grown. You've been one of the fastest growing areas in the country.
Well, we've grown in spite of our need for infrastructure, Chris. We're still America's busiest vacation destination without interstate access, and that means we've got bottlenecks and log jams with traffic. It's interesting to me that when you look particularly in South Carolina, we have been successful at the business of transportation. Companies like Boeing, BMW, and Michelin, who are directly connected to our transportation system, have created thousands of jobs in South Carolina. But when it comes to building and maintaining our own roads, highways, and bridges, we haven't been nearly as successful.
So, you both set public policy, certainly influence public policy, public opinion. Does that undercut does it dramatically undercut economic development plans, Mayor, that you might have for Winston?
Absolutely. We've got to be able to get the product out. So a lot of times when people are looking to come here, we just opened a big Caterpillar manufacturing facility in Winston, $400 million project. And part of the project, we're widening a road, 4 lanes to get it over to the interstate. But more importantly, or as importantly, is we're a hub for rural employment. So we've got to get the people living out in the hinterlands able to get into Winston-Salem to their jobs. So it plays a dual role there.
And Brad, does this Boeing, great win for South Carolina, but when we don't, and education is a whole other piece that we don't even have time to scratch the surface of that one, but when it comes to transportation, infrastructure, transport, transit, does this keep the state, does this keep NISA in your area, does that keep you from being competitive?
Well, I think we've been competitive in part because
I'm sorry to interrupt you again, but does it keep you from being measurably competitive?
Well, we've been competitive in some respects, but not nearly as competitive as we would like to be. Of course, being a right-to-work state and having many of the benefits and quality of life that we offer certainly helps to attract companies to South Carolina. But Chris, make no mistake about it, transportation infrastructure is an absolutely essential component to a successful economic development plan. In South Carolina, you can see under Governor Haley's term, she's been very successful at attracting companies to South Carolina, but many of those are in areas where we have infrastructure. So we need the money to keep that up. And then you look at areas like the PD that have had double-digit unemployment in good times and bad times. They need an economic lifeline, and I would suggest that an important part of that is transportation infrastructure.
Quick point on funding. Let me stay with you for just a second, Brad. The governor in South Carolina is opposed to any type of increase in the gas tax. That seems like that is low-hanging fruit to get some of these roads paved, to get the bridges repaired, to kind of flesh out the larger picture. Do you think she will relent on this? Do you see any softening in that hard line?
I don't anticipate Governor Haley softening on that. We are a bit envious in South Carolina. When we look at North Carolina, the huge difference in gas tax would suggest that there is an opportunity. And we see one major difference. One state is building roads. The other state is talking about the need to build roads. All that said, though, Chris, I think we as a nation have to be realistic. The highway gas tax is not a formula for success in the future. It's an archaic formula. And with more efficient vehicles and consumer habits changing, we're going to have to think differently about how we fund transportation infrastructure in the future. We have a lot of politicians telling us how we won't pay for roads. We've got to figure out how we will pay for them.
So, Mayor, how do we pay for the roads? What would you say to the Secretary of Transportation, who will be here in a moment?
Well, a lot of states are experimenting with things like the vehicle miles travel. Oregon is looking at that, where instead of you lower your gas tax, actually maybe do away with it, but each year when you get your car inspected, you see how many miles you traveled, and you get assessed based on that. So there's some models out there that are being experimented with. I'm not sure all the bugs have been worked out of it, so I think North Carolina is prudent to hold back and kind of see how those things work out. But there are some ways it can be done with.
Yeah, we'll ask the Secretary that in a second. We're going to bring him on in just a moment. Next week on our program, let's talk about that, because it's hard to believe, but we are actually talking about the mid-year economic review. Is that possible, that we're halfway through 2013? I think we are. Next week on this program, 3 economists, Dr. John Sylvia, who's the chief economist at Wells Fargo. Frank Rainwater from the South Carolina Budget and Control Board will be here again. Dr. Scott Baer from Clemson University, and Dr. Pete Summers will be here from High Point University, and we will take a temperature on exactly how we are doing in our region. Our guest seems to not shy away from going to the fight, as they kind of say in the military. It's evident in his resume. He's an alum of the legendary 82nd Airborne out of Fort Bragg. He's a former Army general and a deputy commander in Afghanistan. He was chief operating officer at D.C. Public Schools and superintendent of the embattled Wake County school system here in our state, here, at least in North Carolina. He was named earlier this year by Tar Heel State Governor McCrory as a key member of his cabinet and secretary of the North Carolina Department of Transportation. We welcome to the program the Honorable Anthony Tata. Secretary Tata, welcome. Good to have you here.
Great to be here, Chris. Thank you.
Gosh, I almost don't know where to begin here. Mr. Secretary, when we talk about funding, when we talk about roads, when we talk about economic development, what do you think we miss in the larger picture when we talk about transportation?
Well, Chris, I really think that we're at a key time here. A lot of our infrastructure is at the end of its usable life, and it's wearing out very rapidly. Plus, we're seeing a decline in the revenues that we habitually in North Carolina use. Motor fuels tax revenues are declining because cars are more efficient, and vehicles like Tesla won't use motor fuels at all. And so the way of the future is if you're hinged to motor fuels tax, you don't have a sustainable model going forward. We have a vehicle use tax, a highway use tax at 3% on any new purchase of a newer used vehicle that you pay. That's declining. That's way off its pre-2008 recession highs. And our DMV fees, Division of Motor Vehicle fees, are lower now because we extended the time that you had to renew your driver's license. So all three of our revenue streams are declining. So what Governor McCrory and I have discussed is his guidance to me and the department is take a look at how to move forward with a 25-year strategic plan that first optimizes how we distribute the money. So we've introduced what's called the Strategic Mobility Formula that passed the House with 103 votes, very strong bipartisan support, and it takes a tiered look at how we distribute the money in a more efficient fashion, given the state 40% over a 10-year program, and then 30% to each, the region, which is 2 divisions, and then to 30% to the division. And it increases local input to division and regional projects, and it's 100% data-driven for things like reducing travel time, reducing congestion, increasing economic competitiveness equals jobs, and carrying freight and addressing multimodal. That's the statewide tier. And so we're really looking at how to use infrastructure to catalyze the economy. And so that's now with the Senate. The Senate is treating it favorably right now, and we're in the midst of discussions with the legislatures there. We're hopeful that this is going to pass and change the game on how we distribute money so that we can be needs-based and focus on connecting small towns to large cities, connecting people to job centers, whether or not they're across state lines or not. We got to take a regional look at this, and connecting people to medical centers, connecting people to education centers and to recreation centers. So it goes both ways, because sometimes your more distant areas are your recreation centers, but they're not well connected to the education or the medical or the job center. And so we've got to make sure that we connect in both directions. Then that gives us the ability to plan, right? Because right now the way we distribute money in the Highway Trust Fund in North Carolina, it's 14 divisions, and they each do their own planning, and there's no strategic ability to take a look statewide at what the needs are. So now we will have the ability to develop a strategic plan, and then once we have a plan, we take that to the people and say, this plan is going to cost X, and here's a menu of innovative funding options. And then we really need to do this 25-year plan, and now this plan is going to cost money, and here's how we propose that we pay for it. We felt that we didn't want to just come right out and say, hey, we need more money, and we'll figure out what we're going to do with it. So we think this is a very reasonable, pragmatic approach to being more efficient, developing a plan, figuring out how much it's going to cost, and then going to the people of North Carolina and saying, here it is.
I want to ask you, I know this is the second iteration of what the formula was, and now it's 40-30-30 is basically what it's called, and you expect to get that. Does it benefit rural? Does it benefit urban? How does it balance the needs of rural and urban?
Well, I think it benefits both strongly, which is why it has such bipartisan support. And so as you look at the criteria and the formula and how the money is split out, we've been engaging metropolitan and rural planning organizations and making sure that they understand the formula as well. I mean, it protects PAL bill funds for the cities. We've tried to do as much as we can to make sure that this continues to fund current funding streams that people have relied on and continue to rely on, yet gives us the flexibility to have that strategic planning capability. And so what we're working very closely with Secretary of Commerce Sharon Decker and her team. She's developing economic opportunity zones. We have counties in North Carolina that have declining population and escalating unemployment. Those two things kind of go hand in hand in some of our more rural areas. And so we're looking at how can we can use infrastructure to catalyze those economies or connect them to something that's already catalyzed. And so that's the needs-based. And so the legislature actually added in to the regional and division portions of the formula connectivity. And so we're looking at does it connect to a military base? Does it connect to a hospital area? Does it connect to a university or education area or a job center? It could be Hampton Roads. It could be just anywhere in North Carolina that right now is a job center, in the Piedmont area or elsewhere.
Mayor, question?
Yes, thank you. It's always good to be with the Secretary.
Great to see you, Mayor.
When Governor McCrory, I'm sure you prepared this part of the budget, came forward knowing that transportation is more than just roads, but it had a very strong component for bikeways, pedestrian ways, sure. And it came through the House, passed. It's now over in the Senate, and unfortunately, they're looking to maybe remove some of those provisions there. And I know it concerns me because we've got a couple of key projects. One in our downtown research park is a kind of a Rails to Trails project that was real key to our ability to attract and keep a big technology company. How do you see that shaking out between the Senate and the House?
Well, we're right in the middle of the discussions there, and I've done 3 Greenway openings since I've been Secretary, and have worked very closely with our Bike and Ped division on the Mountains to Sea Trail, and working very closely with the MPOs and RPOs to make sure that planning is being done with them as well. So it's something that I know the mayor or the governor and I strongly support, yes. And so we just got to see how it shakes out with as they're making sausage there in the legislature.
I understand. Yeah. Thank you for your support of that.
Yep.
Mr. Secretary, you mentioned needs-based funding. There's something else we all need in North and South Carolina beyond roads and bridges, and that is jobs. It's interesting to me that there's such a correlation, a strong correlation between job creation and improving and building our infrastructure. In fact, the interstate system, which was created by President Eisenhower, probably one of the best economic development programs our nation's ever seen. Do we always connect the two, the job creation and the importance of improving our infrastructure enough? And if not, what more could we do in our states to connect those two important needs?
Well, I can tell you, as Governor McCrory's #1 theme is job creation through infrastructure development. And just this morning, we had the Council of State meeting, and at the Wilmington Port, we've just approved a project with Enviva, wood pellet timber company that's going to be a multi-million-dollar deal over 10 years, and we're improving the southern loop there so that all the good people from South Carolina can drive up north and take vacations in North Carolina and go to the port for all the jobs that we're creating, because we've had 2 big projects there in the last couple of months, the refrigeration capability and now wood pellet facility at the Port of Wilmington. And so as we take a look at we expand outward throughout the state, we're trying to do that everywhere, where we're taking a micro look at what are the jobs that we can bring. It's in the formula for how we are competing projects. We have a simulation, transportation economic development simulation, and it takes a historical look at if you build X road and this type of environment, it will bring Y number of businesses to it, and it's fairly accurate. And my point is, when people push me on it, is that it's reasonably accurate for all of the projects, or it's reasonably inaccurate for all the projects. But at the end of the day, we are able to predict what kind of jobs we're going to bring based on a project that we're building. And so that's the #3 criteria. We doubled its importance in the formula, so from 10% to 20% of the formula at the state level is how many jobs will a project bring, enduring jobs, not just jobs for building the project. So it's critical.
I want to come back to this thing, Your Honor, about you had talked about Secretary Decker. She was on this program a month ago, and she not just talked about the new shuffle, the new deck at Commerce, but she specifically said a lot of it is connected to what DOT and what transportation needs we have there. So You've mentioned it, she's mentioned it. What, if you can, and it's not proprietary information of some sort, what is the detail of what that is? Do you speak with her? Do your divisions work closely? Is there a much more intentional look at commerce and transportation now?
All of the above, Chris. I speak with Sharon weekly, if not more often. Of course, we see each other at the Monday cabinet meeting, but then throughout the week, we are personally talking. We've appeared at several venues together just by happenstance because the two are so connected, job creation and infrastructure development. And our teams are the lateral, the horizontal interaction between the teams is really magnificent. My Deputy Secretary for Communications is working on the branding that Secretary Decker is leading. And so that's, Chris Mulder actually works for me, but she's over working for Secretary Decker to make sure that we are having input and participating in the development of that. So it's very, the teamwork is really fabulous. And I credit Governor McCrory for that because he picked a team and he's emphasized the teamwork and the collaboration, and he gives guidance. He's in on the front end, and then he's not a micromanager. He's involved and he's given guidance, and then he helps where you need him to help, and he's just a fabulous leader in that regard. And so as you look at the teamwork that's happening throughout the government today, the state government, it's really, we're getting a lot of things done. These projects that the refrigeration at the port, the wood pellet, that's been kicked around for 2 years. We're getting these things done because environment and John Scavarla, Secretary Decker and I put our heads together and said, what can we do now fast? And we're moving as quickly as we can, because we know that our unemployment in North Carolina is 2% higher than the national average. And so what we do is we look at those areas that are most affected for the longest period of time. And I was just in Division 14 and out in Andrews and Robbinsville and surrounding areas, and trying to really understand how do you bring infrastructure to that mountainous region there that's going to support the new Harrah's Casino that's going to be in Cherokee County. And really, what's their market? It's really Atlanta and Chattanooga and Knoxville, more so than Raleigh. And so we're looking at this from a multi-state perspective so that we can attract people to North Carolina so that we can improve the economy. We've got to have the highways, the rail, the airports, the ports, and even the bike ped division. We've got to have the greenways. Number one factor in purchasing our home in the Triangle was proximity to a greenway, and greenways hold value for homes, and so they're so important, and that's why I get these routine updates from my bike ped division on that. So it's all of the modes of transportation, and transit is something that in Wake County we're going to have to look at. We're doing a major resurfacing, a tear down and rebuild of 40 and 440, and we've got to have some good transit options in place. And there's so much more that we need to do. I talked to freight companies or manufacturing companies out in the Winston and Greensboro area, and they talked to me about congestion on 85 and them making decisions about where they're locating manufacturing plants and delivery plants, because in today's just-in-time logistics world, we've got to be able to move freight and cargo and product quickly, because if you miss a 30-minute window, they may eat that product over the weekend or forever, and it may not make it to market, and that can make or break a company in today's environment.
And you're speaking like a general now, like a guy that knows how to do that. We've got about 30 seconds left, and I want to get this in quickly. So, and this is going to be a tough one to answer in a quick period of time. So is a new transportation policy, is it more about getting more money, or is it more about being more determined and smarter with the resources that we have?
I think it's both, Chris, because we've got to get set. We've got to have the plan before we go to the people and say, hey, we need more money. So this is about being more efficient. One of Governor McCrory's 3 E's, education, economy, and efficiency. So this is economy and efficiency. So we're being more efficient, and we're also move into a plan where we can go to the people and say, this is how much it's going to cost.
Mr. Secretary, thank you. Please come back. Good to have you on the program.
Great to be here, Chris. Thank you.
Brad, nice to see you. Mayor, good to have you.
Good to be here.
Thank you. Until next week, I'm Chris Williams. Good night.
Major funding for Carolina Business Review was provided by the Duke Endowment, a private foundation enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina. Who's responsible for rising healthcare costs? Join us and many others in a candid discussion at letstalkcost.com. Grant Thornton. Operating in more than 100 countries, our tax, audit, and advisory professionals specialize in helping companies unlock their growth potential. Novant Health, bringing you world-class technology, clinicians, and care, when and where you need it. Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services, with more than 300 operations in 35 countries. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of South Carolina, where healthcare is changing for the better. Find out how at ahealthysc.tv. And by viewers like you. Thank you. Promotional consideration provided by Business North Carolina Magazine. For more information, visit carolinabusinessreview.com.